Out of all the dreams that one could have, there are some dreams that will forever stay with you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Archive of Antiquity channel. In this episode of the Dream Journal, an analysis and interpretation of the Dreamscape, I will recall a dream that I had in the early 90s that left me feeling somewhat perplexed when I woke up. To this day, this particular dream still leaves me wondering about the unfinished business of the past and the possibility that something of great significance, something of great importance, still remains hidden and needs to be revealed. In December 1994, I had a very interesting dream. When I look back over the course of my life to that very point in time, I have every reason to believe that the trajectory of my life path may have been altered as a result of my having experienced this dream. On this particular night, there was the appearance of a male presence within my dream. The presence was without physical form and appeared to be in a spiritual state of being. Somehow, I was able to intuit that the spiritual presence that had come to me was that of a male. In the very next sequence of my dream state, we began astral traveling at great speed over an expanse of great distance. When we reached an unknown destination that I spiritually intuited to be located somewhere on the continent of Africa, we were suddenly underground, deep below the surface of the earth. Having descended underground, we appeared to enter into a tunnel that had been carved deep within the earth. When we entered into the tunnel, we began traveling at great speed around a curved passageway. At a certain point along the passageway, the male presence that was with me suddenly stopped. As I looked up at the curved wall of earth before me, my spirit became afraid. However, through my fear, I could see the embedding of several upright standing sarcophagi like structures that had been buried within the curve of the earthen wall. As my spiritual presence looked upon each of the upright sarcophagi, I paused when I came to the second of 12 containers that had been encased within the earth. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Just when I began to tell myself within my mind that that couldn't be me up there buried inside the wall, the spiritual form of the male presence that was with me stated, "They found what we put away." From the location of our position before the curve of the earthen wall, I will describe what I saw, for it is in a day forthcoming that the world shall learn of something hidden underground. If one were to turn around and away from the curved earthen wall of upright standing sarcophagi, they would be able to look out over the great open hall of a multi-leveled underground labyrinth. As one continues to follow the pathway, moving deeper into the tunnel of the hidden underground, they would come upon an open chamber in its construction just beyond the great hall of the labyrinth. Within the room of this chamber is a statue which has been mounted to stand at the head of a stone sarcophagus which has been laid to rest horizontally upon its base. If one were to exit the room of this chamber and continue along the underground passageway, they will pass the last tomb of the upright standing sarcophagi on the left. As they proceed to the very end of the curved tunnel, they will find the room of a second open chamber on the right. From what I can recall, there was something significant about this room that I intuited as relating to star maps of the universe. Directly across from the room of the second open chamber is an antechamber. Within the room of this antechamber, there is the presence of a table. Positioned around the table are several chairs along its length on both sides, and then two chairs positioned at either end of the table. It reminded me of the table and chair scene within the Last Supper painting. Located on the rear wall of the antechamber, just beyond the table is a door. When one enters through this door, one will find themselves within a room of great breadth and of great circumference. All around the curved wall of this room are what appear to be individual vaults, wherein each vault appears to be covered by a metal-type door with some form of engraving or marking upon each of them. In the very center of this large circular room is a console, referred to as a chariot. As one enters into this room of great breadth and of great circumference, know that there is something significant about the very first vault found to the left of the entrance. The items contained within this particular vault could be considered contradictory or anomalous, for the vault contains artifacts and information that, in appearance, have been created within the current history of the present age. Fade to black, this is where the dream ends. Time to awaken from the dream for an analysis and interpretation of the dreamscape. Let's begin by determining whether or not any recent activities within my waking life may have contributed to me having this dream. When I go back in time and reflect upon what was occurring in my life at this time, I can honestly say that this dream was not a continuation from the previous day's activities within my waking life, nor do I remember being engaged in anything that would have been directly related to some of the specifics that manifested within the dream back in 1994. However, what I can say is that about 4 to 5 years prior, in the late 1980s to the early 1990s, I had read a book about a man named Edgar Cayce, who gained notoriety as a clairvoyant and seer. From what I can recall, Cayce possessed the ability to access the Akashic records when he placed himself into a trance-like state. It was while he was in this altered state that he was able to give accurate predictions and readings related to medical cures, ancient history, the future of mankind, etc. As it relates to ancient history, Edgar Cayce is best known for his predictions and readings related to the future discovery of a hall of records that is supposedly located beneath the Great Pyramid in Egypt. He further states that the hall's entrance is located underground beneath the paw of the Great Sphinx. So, based upon the details that presented themselves within my dream, my having read about Edgar Cayce is the closest thing that I could think of that may have been triggered within my subconscious mind. However, there is another part of me that thinks that it may be a bit of a stretch to think that my dreaming mind would have recalled the details of having read this book and incorporated it into a dream that I would have like 4 to 5 years later. But you never know. Dreams can be funny like that sometimes. Back in 1994, I remember telling the man that I was dating at the time about the dream. After listening to me describe the details of the dream, he looked straight at me and said, "You dreaming of seeing yourself buried in the wall like that means you feel stuck somewhere in your life." At the time, I didn't agree with him, but we'll go ahead and extend the benefit of the doubt to his point of view and take a look at my dream from the perspective of symbolism. When I reflect upon the symbolism of the man in spirit form who came to me in my dream and whisked me away to a hidden place underground, I feel that his presence was symbolic of a spiritual guide who had been tasked with making me aware of hidden mysteries within myself that have yet to be discovered, revealed, and understood. When I found my spirit self astral traveling at a great rate of speed toward an unknown destination, in my dreaming mind, I felt invigorated. I felt that my spirit was flying freely without abandon, and I can remember feeling the emotions of anticipation in those moments. I feel that this type of flight scenario within the dreamscape symbolizes the freedom one feels in exploring the unknown and the anticipation one feels when they embark on a spiritual quest of adventure and discovery. In some biblical, archaeological, and scientific circles, it is believed that life may have originated on the continent of Africa. Based upon archaeological research, it is believed that the oldest human fossils have been found in this area of the world. With this in mind, and as it relates to my dream, I believe that my feeling that we had astral traveled to an unknown area or region in Africa may symbolize a return to origin or the beginning of all things. Among some individuals, the African continent is referred to as the motherland or the homeland. From this perspective, my astral flight in the spirit to this area of the world may symbolize a return to the mother, who is the nurturer, the guardian, and the protector of her children who seek nourishment, comfort, guidance, etc. Considered by many to be the mother country, the cradle of humanity, the cradle of civilization, etc., I feel that my astral travel to the continent of Africa may also symbolize my going back in time where everything began, back in time to something long forgotten. I have also considered the possibility that the spirit of Mother Africa may have called upon my spirit to return home in order to be reminded of something related to my soul's purpose. Beyond the literal existence of something hidden underground, as described within my dream, it is possible that the caverns of this earthly underground could be symbolic of the inner world of my hidden self, my spiritual self, or the inner landscape of my soul. With that said, let's briefly refer to the metaphysical definition for the term Golgotha. The metaphysical definition for the term Golgotha, the cavern of Golgotha, or the cave of Golgotha, is defined as the place of the skull. It is the housing for the seat of the conscious mind, wherein the intellect shall ultimately be subdued in order for the spirit to achieve eternal ascendancy. In other words, Golgotha can be viewed as the seat of the psyche, where mental, emotional, and psychological centers of activity take place. When it comes to the symbolism of the pathway that we followed in the hidden underground, I am interpreting it in two different ways. The first interpretation is from the perspective of both biology and psychology, where I feel the hidden underground represents the inner world for the landscape of my soul, and that across this inner landscape there exists the pathway of a neural network within my brain center. In biology, neural networks are responsible for the processing and routing of information within the brain. The second interpretation is from a spiritual perspective, where I feel that my soul may be following a predetermined pathway within the inner world for the landscape of my soul. I have also entertained the idea that this inner pathway may be encoded with my soul's purpose, so that as my soul follows the pathway within my inner world, this activity is simultaneously being reflected on the life path that I am following within the outer world. As the saying goes, as within, so without. We will now shift our focus to the symbolism of the open space within the Great Hall and the structure of the labyrinth that featured multi-level walking terraces constructed within its walls. From both a biological and psychological perspective, I interpret the whole of this structure as being the heart of my thinking mind, wherein the open space of the Great Hall is symbolic of the heart center of my brain and the place where the feelings, emotions, and desires of my heart originate. I feel that the multi-leveled walking terraces of the labyrinth that are constructed within the walls around the Great Hall is symbolic of brain function activity associated with the processing of my thoughts. In my further analysis of this underground structure, I would say that the symbolism of the Great Hall as my heart center can be seen as the driving force that influences the thought processing center of the labyrinth. Ultimately, it is the structure of the Great Hall of the labyrinth that is symbolic of Golgotha, the seat of my psyche and the place within my skull where mental, emotional, and psychological centers of activity take place within the heart of my thinking mind. With that said, let us now turn around within our imaginations and move from out of the great hall of the labyrinth. As we move toward the winding underground passage of the pathway, we can see the upright standing sarcophagi coming into view where they are embedded within the curved earthen wall. Now that we have come to stand before the embedded casings, we can see that there are a total of 12 sarcophagi that have been set vertically within the wall, and that one of them appears to contain a physical representation of myself. From a psycho-spiritual perspective, I interpret the likeness of my presence within the wall as the inspirited essence of my ensouled being, having been placed within a position as the guardian, protector, and keeper who looks out over unto the great hall of the labyrinth, overseeing the functional operation of information processing which takes place within my personal Golgotha, or the heart center of my thinking mind. Additionally, I feel that the 12 upright sarcophagi could be symbolic of the various aspects of my ensouled being and the different facets of my personality and their various characters of expression. In my further analysis of the relationship between the 12 upright sarcophagi and the great hall of the labyrinth, I feel that it is within the inner world for the landscape of my soul that the winding underground passage may symbolically represent a neural pathway within my brain center that is responsible for receiving the neurotransmission of information that has been processed within the great hall of the labyrinth. From this perspective, the refined result of this information, having been processed within the heart of my thinking mind, would then be transmitted and distributed among the 12 facets, elements, or aspects of my personality where they are embedded within the wall, so that ultimately this information could be expressed by my soul within the outer world. Let us now move along the underground passageway to the first open chamber, which contained a statue and a stone sarcophagus. As I have reflected upon this particular room within my dream, I am not quite sure how to interpret it. I cannot remember specific details as to the likeness, character, or image associated with the statue, such as facial features, gender, clothing, etc. What I do remember is that both of these ancient artifacts appear to be carved of some dark gray or black stone. However, as I reflect upon this room from a spiritual perspective, I am considering the possibility that this chamber and the artifacts located within it could be symbolic of my oversoul or my higher self. With that said, let's exit the room of this chamber and continue along the pathway in the hidden underground. Moving along the pathway toward the second chamber, located at the very end of the winding passage, we will pass the last of the upright standing sarcophagi that are embedded within the curved wall to our left. As we move deeper into the underground corridor, we are now passing the entrance to the room with the table and chairs on our left. When we continue to move toward the dead end of the passageway, we will arrive at the room of the second chamber located on the right. From what I recall from my dream, this room left me with the impression of outer space or the universe. The reason for this is because I remember looking around this room in my dream and seeing tiny specks of twinkling light within the walls and within the ceiling. In my dreaming mind, this second chamber reminded me of some of the images I have seen of various starscapes and star maps of the universe. When I attempt to analyze the meaning or significance of this second chamber and what it may symbolize from a biological, psychological, or spiritual perspective, I am once again at a loss as to what this room could possibly represent. Maybe it has something to do with my soul having, I don't know, visited other lifetimes or having other lifetimes beyond the stars. I'm not really sure about this one. So let's move on and go across the pathway to the antechamber. When we enter this room and take a look around, we can see that there's a table with several chairs positioned around it. There is also a door located at the back of the room on the rear wall. If you will recall from my dream, I stated that when my spirit presence or my astral presence entered this room, my dreaming mind immediately thought of the scene from the Last Supper painting. So, when I reflect upon what this room may symbolize, the first question that comes to my mind is, what are tables and chairs normally used for? In answering this question, there are three main things that most people use tables and chairs for, that being a place to eat or consume meals, a place to gather or conduct meetings, or a place to work, accomplish tasks, complete projects, etc. Although I cannot recall from my dream the total number of chairs that were positioned around the table, what came to my mind when I considered the symbolism of this room was whether or not there could have been a total of 12 chairs for each of the 12 sarcophagi that overlooked the great hall of the labyrinth. From a psycho-spiritual perspective, I pondered with the idea that if the 12 embedded sarcophagi represented various aspects of my soul, then would it be possible that each of the elements of my soul being to be coming to this room to seek spiritual nourishment as well as a place to accomplish my soul's purpose? Not really sure. But when I reflect upon this possibility, I imagine that my soul may be moving back and forth along the neural pathway of the winding underground passage, going back and forth between the embedded casings within the wall and this antechamber containing the table and chairs. I thought that that might be quite interesting as a possibility. So, with that said, there is a door located on the rear wall of this room. What, if anything, does the door symbolically represent? As it relates to the details of my dream, each point of significance that we have analyzed up to this point has resulted in my own personal interpretation of what I feel each point symbolizes. However, when it comes to the symbolism of the door or doorway that is before us here in the antechamber, I'm going to refer to a web page entitled The Symbolism of Doorways that I found on the Fringe Arts Bath website, where it states, doorways are often used to represent transition, the passage between one place or state of being and the next. This might be childhood to adulthood, for instance, leaving one part of life behind, moving on to another, the threshold between one place and another. But doorways can symbolize so much more. Doorways always represent a choice, a decision, the choice to stay or to go, or to embark upon one path or another. The metaphor of a corridor of doors is often used to represent a multitude of choices. But before choice becomes a decision, doorways often represent the act of making decisions itself, or the fear and inertia of indecision. Doorways have been symbols of new life, of birth, of a doorway to the world. They have also, however, seen symbols of death, of passing from this life to the next, or to whatever awaits beyond the door. Of others who are already there. They can be loaded with hope of new opportunities, of new horizons, leaving the now behind to a better next. They can represent an escape, a way out, even to places of fantastical imagining. But they can also be loaded with fear, with worry, and with uncertainty. We fear the unseen or the unknown. We cannot know what is beyond the door until we pass the threshold, just as the future is unknown to us. An open door can represent welcome, invitation, and encouragement. Locked doors can symbolize protection or privacy, keeping us safe inside from the threat from outside. Doors were once daubed with an X to symbolize the presence of plague, or else they represent imprisonment, even entrapment, enclosure, or control. And if we are on the outside, closed doors offer little but cold comfort, even banishment. A lot depends on which side we're on. Doors are locked to keep us in or barred to keep us out. Locked doors can represent a lack of inclusion, of expulsion, the separation of us from the other. It all depends upon whether we are inside or outside. Doorways can represent exits, entrances, departures, or arrivals. They can also be representative of lovers, friends, or family moving out or moving in. A doorway can be seen as always moving, the act of transition, the act of anticipating, fearing, welcoming a change from here to there, from the now to the next, from the known to the unknown. And finally, a door or a doorway can represent a threshold to somewhere new or laced with fear, representing the unknown and the unseen. With that said, let's open the door that is before us and cross over the threshold to that which lay beyond. As we open the door and enter into the chamber, we are greeted by a very, very large room that can best be described as a grand circular chamber whose scope, scale, and size of circumference is exceedingly great. If you will recall from my dream, there were four main things that stood out about this room. Firstly, it is the sheer size of the chamber itself that has left a lasting and most memorable impression within my dreaming mind. Secondly, I stated that as one entered this particular chamber, they would see what would appear to be several vaults of encasement having been built into the wall all around the perimeter of the room, and that each individual vault appeared to be covered by a panel or a door made of some type of metal that had been carved with various markings or engravings. Thirdly, I stated that there was the presence of a console or a chariot located within the center of the room. And lastly, I stated that the very last vault to the immediate left of the door contained items and information that could be considered anomalous, for the materials contained within this vault appear to be works that have been accomplished or created within the current day of our modern era. With that said, let's conduct a dream analysis and interpretation for each of these details so that we can uncover any hidden meanings, underlying messages, and/or any symbolism that may be associated with them. From a metaphysical perspective, I feel that the console or the chariot represents the center of my being, the center of my universe, and the center point within my soul being. We'll begin by standing in the middle of the room where the console of the chariot is located, so that from this position of perspective, we can have a 360-degree view of the chamber. Starting with the first vault to the right of the chamber's entrance, what immediately stands out is the circular shape of the chamber and the number of vaults that have been set and encased all around the wall. From the perspective of time or the cycles of time, the shape of the room can be symbolically compared to a clock, a calendar round, and a compass all in one. From our position within the middle of the chamber, we can turn and rotate in place similar to the movements of the hour hand, the minute hand, and the second hand on a clock, revolving in a counterclockwise circle as we look around the room. From a geological perspective, the circular shape of the room can also be compared to the shape of the planet Earth. So, from the console of the chariot, we can request a 3D model of the Earth and project the hologram of the planet throughout the room so that it fills the whole of the chamber. Now that we find ourselves within the center of the holographic Earth, we can continue to revolve in a circle from the center point of the chariot and see the doors of each vault where they are encased within the chamber walls. In so doing, we can go back in time to what we read earlier about the symbolism of doors and the various meanings that can be attributed to the presence of a door, a series of doors, or a doorway. For the engraved panel of every door represents a hermetically sealed vault, likened unto a doorway to history's past. The hermetically sealed vaults contain the records and the documented history of all activity having occurred within the earth from the beginning of time, throughout the ages, and unto the present day. It is from within the womb of time that one could see the entire history of the world. As we realign within the center point of the chariot, we will now complete the rotation of our revolution around the room, for we have come full circle in a grand cycle of evolutionary completion and have arrived at the door of the last vault within the chamber wall. If you will recall, when we first entered the chamber, I stated that the very last vault to the immediate left of the door contained items and information that could be considered anomalous, for the materials contained within this vault appeared to be works that have been accomplished or created within the current day of our modern era. But how could that possibly be? Because surely, through the scientific investigations of carbon dating, the items contained within this particular vault appear to bear the signature of a very aged antiquity. With that said, let us now move forward to the conclusion of our analysis and interpretation of the dreamscape. We'll take a final look at my dream and consider several other possibilities. From a psycho-spiritual perspective, the first possibility that we can consider is that the inspirited essence of my ensouled being may have been seeking the answer to something, maybe seeking to resolve something, or seeking information with regard to my soul's purpose or some other outstanding issue. In so doing, my soul may have embarked on an inner journey to access information from deeper levels within my subconscious. I say this because within each one of us, there exists an internal repository of history, which can be likened unto a personal storehouse, a personal archive, or a personal vault of storage which houses our past life experiences and memories, and everything that our souls have ever accomplished or achieved over the course of several life cycles of reincarnation. As such, this gives credence to the notion that everything we need to know is already within us, and that the answers that we seek can be found within the depths of self-reflection and looking inward for the solution. From both a metaphysical and biological perspective, the second possibility is that the winding underground passage may have been symbolic of my spinal column versus a neural pathway within my brain center. In other words, the Great Hall of the Labyrinth would still symbolically represent the processing center for the heart of my thinking mind within my cranium of Golgotha. However, the difference would lay in the fact that the winding underground passage now becomes the neural network of my spinal column versus a neural pathway within my brain center. So, if we were to look at my dream from the perspective of the spinal column, we could also consider the fact that the chakra system is said to align along this energetic channel. When I took this into account, I toyed with the idea that the chambers located at the end of the passageway could possibly represent the sacral chakra or the root chakra that is located at the base of the spine. From a literal perspective, the third possibility that we can consider is that my dream may have been a portent or foreshadowing of things to come, meaning that a hidden repository of ancient history likened unto an archive of antiquity may very well be found one day within the earth, similar to what Edgar Cayce indicated with regard to the Hall of Records. After all, when I reflect upon the sheer size and enormity of the large circular room that I saw in my dream, the first thing that comes to my mind is the physical existence of an Akashic record. With that said, let's bring this episode of the Dream Journal to a close with some final thoughts. I keep saying to myself over and over again, something's wrong. Bittersweet as it is interesting how the unfinished business of the past or a past life can carry over into another lifetime, waiting within the deepest recesses of the psyche as the great work of what I see as my soul's purpose to be reawakened once again. beckoning me to return to a time of long and ago, a time to tie up loose ends, like a message from my previous self to my current self. All the signs seem to be pointing to the fact that I have come full circle to a certain point in my life, a certain point on my spiritual path, and a certain point in my spiritual journey which requires me to walk back down the memory lane of history, to go back in time in order to make what went wrong so long ago right again. Because you see, something happened many thousands of years ago that changed the entire course of history on this planet. And my soul will not rest until something, somewhere in time, is resolved once and for all. I have often wondered whether or not I may have accomplished something in a previous lifetime that was meant for me to rediscover and bring forth in this current lifetime. I say this because I have been working on a long term project related to ancient history for several years now, something that I never expected or envisioned that I would be doing. Like I said in the beginning, I have often felt that the trajectory of my life path may have been altered as a result of my having experienced this dream. Everything seemed to change or shift at this particular point in my life. As a side note, could the cavern of Golgotha, or the cave of Golgotha, the place of the skull, be equated to Plato's allegory of the cave? Are we trying to get out of our heads and escape from out of the prison that has been constructed around our minds? Are we literally trying to escape from out of the prison matrix of this physical material world? Are we trying to do both?